regular show The Lost Tapes has so far succeeded at feeling like regular show. But is something perhaps missing? Let's compare a Lost Tapes episode to an episode from the original show, and figure out what makes regular show regular show. Chapter 1. Burger Motivation. Best Burger in the World from Season 3 of the base show and Skips Luau from The Lost Tapes have one major similarity. Both episodes revolve around Mordecai and Rigby needing to complete a task in order to eat a burger. Sounds like a pretty regular motivation, but each episode does try to make their respective burger seem special enough that the audience can believe it as the stakes of the story. In Best Burger in the World, the burger is described as this convoluted creation that's only available once every 100 years, striking a perfect balance between the mundane and the mystical that is just so regular show. In Skips Luau, the burger has a slice of pineapple on it. And look, I kind of get what they're going for. There is something at least a little bit humorous about how Mordecai and Rigby get so worked up over a slightly uncommon burger topping, but when you compare the two motivations side by side, you can see just how much the 100-year burger sets the foundation of the emotional core of that episode. Early on, in Best Burger in the World, while Benson is explaining all of the jobs Mordecai and Rigby slacked off on and now have to make up for, or they can't have the burger, the camera pans over to the food truck guy setting up, creating a direct contrast between what our protagonists have to do and what they want. Skips' Luau takes a much less clever approach, opting to just have this little animation moment that shows they want this burger. It really lacks that oomph that the 100-year burger just kinda has, you know? This pineapple burger motivation makes me ask the question, why can't Mordecai and Rigby make their own burger with pineapple? And if you think that's a nitpicky criticism, think about how in Best Burger in the World, I would not be able to ask that question, because the 100-year burger puts in the work to convince us that there is no other chance for Mordecai and Rigby to ever experience the thing that they want. And this feeling ripples throughout the episode. As Mordecai and Rigby keep trying to get away from their work to get the burger, we really are made to feel the suspense and desperation that the characters are feeling. Whereas Skips' Luau lacks that same sense of urgency. And this sense of urgency matters beyond just allowing us to better empathize with the characters. It affects our ability to engage with the lesson each respective story is going for. Chapter 2. Regular Themes. These two episodes, as well as many other regular show episodes, teach a lesson about responsibility by directly challenging Mordecai and Rigby's character flaw, laziness. In Best Burger in the World, Benson states that they have to do extra work because they slacked off on so many other jobs. And throughout the episode, it is made abundantly clear that if Mordecai and Rigby just buckled down and finished their jobs instead of wasting time trying to get around Benson, they would have been able to get the burger the right way. In Skips' Luau, their character flaw of laziness, while still present, is much less defined. The inciting incident of the episode is Mordecai and Rigby crashing the cart while towing some trash to the dump and getting garbage everywhere. Like, sure, it's their own fault it happened because they were chanting "Luau" when the cart crashed, but that's not really an indicator of their character flaw. It's more so just something they did that made something happen. Think about it. The same thing that got Mordecai and Rigby into trouble at the beginning of Best Burger in the World, i.e. their laziness making their jobs pile up, is the same thing that consistently challenges them throughout the episode. However, even though the beginning of Skips' Luau lacks establishing Mordecai and Rigby's character flaw, it does show them cutting corners when it comes to Benson's rule that they aren't allowed to move the trash using anything with wheels, with them finding a loophole and using a hovercraft. It is a clever plot point and feels very regular show, but without the high stakes and establishment of character flaw that was present in Best Burger in the World, it just doesn't resonate as strongly with the audience. Chapter 3. The Something Weird. A staple of the average regular show episode is when something weird starts happening, usually towards the last few minutes of the episode. The most basic example of this is Season 1's Just Set Up the Chairs. First scene, Benson tells Mordecai and Rigby to set up chairs. Second to last scene, giant video game head is gonna destroy the park. These stark tone shift third acts are what make regular show anything but a regular show. Compared to Just Set Up the Chairs, the something weird of both Best Burger in the World and Skips Luau are less weird, but still fit the regular show mold. In Best Burger, Mordecai and Rigby find a hologram creating machine in Skips' garage, and are presented with a choice to either finish the work they're almost done with, or use the hologram machine to trick Benson. A final test to see if they can overcome their character flaw, which they fail when they create the holograms. This leads to the final action sequence of the episode, where Mordecai and Rigby fight against the hologram. It's a pretty straightforward fight. At first, the holograms have the upper hand and then get shattered by some rocks. Usually, in a final fight of a story, the heroes should win the fight because they overcome their character flaw, which Mordecai and Rigby do not do in this episode. However, them winning the fight wasn't the thing they wanted. What they wanted was the burgers, and the fight itself was nothing more than a red herring for the real ending of the story, which is Benson eating the one-of-a-kind burgers. You know, it's funny, because a lot of people hate this ending because they're mad Mordecai and Rigby lost. But if you break down the lesson the episode is trying to teach, the disappointment you feel at seeing them miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity is exactly how you're supposed to feel, and is one of the reasons this story succeeds. And by the way, Mordecai and Rigby totally deserved it, and if you've ever had coworkers like Mordecai and Rigby, you'd be inclined to agree. So the something weird moment in Skips' Luau is kind of the hovercraft, but more so the US military thinking they're aliens and chasing after them, which ends up destroying the Luau. I get what they're going for. Mordecai and Rigby cut corners with the hovercraft, which attracts the military, which destroys the Luau. But it's just all a bit too straightforward and doesn't meaningfully challenge or comment on their character flaw. The final conclusions are pretty muddy as well, with Mordecai and Rigby getting yelled at, sure, but they still get to eat the burgers they wanted, even though they didn't overcome a character flaw. But then Benson, of all characters, is the one who truly loses in the end, with his date shacking up with the Air Force pilot. I think that maybe the reason the episode punishes Benson is because his wheels rule was unreasonable. So because he set such a strict rule, it led to the Air Force guy showing up and stealing his girl. But if that's the case, then this should have been a Benson-focused episode where he failed to overcome a more prominent character flaw. It just seems like the episode is punishing Benson because he's a mean old boss, and rewards Mordecai and Rigby because they're the likable main characters, as opposed to Best Burger in the World, which had its outcomes determined by what would work best with the story. Chapter 4. Feels like regular show. So, in many ways, Skips' Luau checks all the regular show boxes. You got Mordecai and Rigby doing something wacky to get around working, you got a mundane motivator taken overly seriously, you got something weird happening, an 80s reference, and at the end, Mordecai and Rigby better clean this up or they're fired. But while Skips' Luau certainly feels like regular show, what it's lacking are things that should be present in every show. Well-defined stakes, challenging of character flaws, and ending that invokes a strong emotional feeling. But why did Skips Luau lack these things while Best Burger in the World had them? Is that just what happens with reboots? Are they destined to be a hollow shell of their former selves? No, not really. I just compared a really well-written original show episode and a more mediocre Lost Tapes episode. For example, Season 5 of the base show, Heart of a Stuntman, suffers from a lot of the same writing issues, mainly being that no character has any sort of character flaw challenged. And Good Mitch Hunting from the Lost Tapes does center around a character arc from Muscle Man, showing that you can have some weaker episodes from the original show and some strong episodes from Lost Tapes. The problem, I think, is that an episode like Best Burger in the World, for the most part, happens almost by accident. See, I've spent this whole video demonstrating the exact writing principles that made that a solid episode. But what I'd like to know is, were they considering any of that while writing Best Burger in the World? Or did all of these things simply fall into place in that episode? And if they were following these writing principles when writing that episode, how come they don't follow them when they write every episode? On this channel, I often cover modern SpongeBob, and usually when I cover that subject, I find myself being a bit sensationalist with my criticisms. They ruin the imagination box. They keep bringing back Nosferatu. This episode is everything wrong with modern SpongeBob. And while I have spoken positively of some modern SpongeBob episodes, the low points of the series give me a lot of opportunity to discuss what poor writing looks like. Regular show The Lost Tapes, I'm pleased to say, isn't really a subject that has drawn such a strong criticism from me. And for the most part, the problems it has are, no pun intended, quite regular. While I do think that what I've seen so far from The Lost Tapes is a tad weaker on average from what the original show accomplished, it still does feel like regular show. And in a lot of ways, I'm glad for that. And I'm even more glad it still looks like regular show. Thank goodness it's still 2D animated. Imagine if it got the Kamp Koral treatment. I mean, talk about a show that has problems. Actually, I already did for 2 hours when I reviewed every single episode of Kamp Koral, which you should totally check out by clicking this link on the screen. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, please consider becoming a channel member or supporting my Patreon. See you next time.